Good morning, my name's Naomi. I am the Operations Manager for St James's Church, and this morning I am doing our changing session. So the whole purpose of these Wednesday morning sessions is to look at the topic from Sunday and then how we can go deeper into that and really look at how our hearts and our lives are changing with God. So Mark's talk on Sunday was all about Jesus the King, and towards the end of his talk Mark described Jesus as the servant king, the king who defeated death, the king above all kings. King Jesus was also the king who knelt down and washed his disciples' feet. He was the king who mixed his saliva with mud to heal the blind man. He was the king who spent his time serving others. And it's that aspect of Jesus that I want to focus on today. Not how can Jesus serve me, but how can I develop that same heart? How can I grow a servant's heart? How can I become servant-hearted in the same way that Jesus was? Because we were created to serve. 1 Corinthians 3 verse 9 says, "For we are co-workers in God's service." So we are created to serve. Once we've been saved, once we understand what Jesus did for us, we choose to serve him. This service can take on many different forms in different seasons, but it's what we're called to do. We serve because Jesus served. In Matthew 20 verses 27 to 28, Jesus said, "Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many." In Philippians chapter 2, and this is where Mark preached from on Sunday, Paul writes, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. He made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant and being made in human likeness." So it's that concept of Jesus' heart, his servant heart, that I really want to kind of dive deeper into, and then looking at how we develop that servant heart in ourselves. So what does a servant heart look like? Well, the first thing I've kind of picked out is that a servant heart is willing to work. For us to be co-workers, like in 1 Corinthians 3, we need to work. We need to make ourselves available to work. Now, that might mean giving up our own plans or our own priorities to make them fit with God's priorities. For many of us, this might look like asking at the beginning of the day, perhaps in that prayer time that Mark was talking about last week, we might just ask Jesus, "Please use me today." As part of our habit of prayer, let's offer ourselves to God. Let's be willing to serve, setting up that servant-hearted attitude for the day. A servant heart really pays attention to the needs of others. The Son of Man came to serve others, and we need to do the same. I think it's really helpful to look at Galatians 6 here, particularly verses 9 and 10. Which say, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." The Bible's really clear here. We need to serve the church family first. Now, I think that's really interesting, especially in our current context when we're not able to meet in person. But I suppose this really supports Jesus' commandment to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another, as he says in John 13:35. I think that's often reflected in church as well. So when I started to serve as part of a church, I first of all served on the coffee rota with my small group. It was quite easy, quite accessible to do. I was serving as part of a team, and I was serving my church. Then I moved on to serving Alpha meals, again still in the kitchen, not really interacting with people, still as part of a team, but developing that servant, developing that skill of serving. Once I'd done that for a season, then I moved into serving, by leading an Alpha group, and I served the needs of the church before serving the needs of the community. So if you are looking to start serving, if you don't serve anywhere at the moment, then I'd really recommend that you start serving the church first, perhaps on the refreshments rota, on the welcome team, on the prayer team. You get to know people, which is really, really important, and you get to know the systems, but you'll also grow in your experience and your understanding of service. If you are developing, then perhaps you need to look at where you're serving your community, where you're kind of living on your front line, where you are showing that servant heart with the people you meet every day. The other thing I picked out when I was looking at the different Bible passages is that a servant heart is humble. We're told to do nothing out of selfish ambition, but to value others above ourselves. The word servant and even slaves used in Matthew 20 have these very humble connotations. A servant and a slave, probably not jobs that people would choose to do. But it's a difficult attitude to maintain, that of a servant and a slave. It takes really constant dependence on God and a constant submitting of your own will to him each day, each hour, each minute sometimes. And I think this is really hard, particularly in today's kind of culture of self-promotion, where we've got Instagram and TikTok, where everyone is striving to be the most successful and the most accomplished and the most beautiful, with the most beautiful home and the most perfectly well-behaved children. Humility doesn't really sit well on social media. But that's what we're called to do. And I think when I think about it, I've learned most about humility by being around people who are humble. I've learned, and I'm still learning, to develop a servant heart by being around those who are servant-hearted, who just get on with what needs to be done, who are willing to do whatever, who are the first people when we say we could do with some people to do this, they say, yes, absolutely, I would love to do that. It's also about not being too proud to serve in roles which might be perceived as low-skilled or basic. One of the lessons we're really learning in this coronavirus pandemic is, who is it who really keeps this country going? Who are the key workers? They aren't the people in offices wearing suits. Instead, it's the supermarket cashiers and shelf stackers, the hospital cleaners and porters, and those in the caring professions. Those generally doing the most humble jobs. Let's not be too proud to do those jobs, to do the chair stacking, the washing up and the clearing away, those jobs that no one really wants to do. After all, these are things that everyone would notice if they didn't happen. These are the jobs that anyone could do, but it takes a servant-hearted attitude to do them. So let's look for opportunities to serve. Respond to the needs in front of you, whatever they are, and pray each day, God, use me today. Let's develop the hearts of servants, echoing Jesus' own example.